Hey everyone, rate this revenge 1 to 10. How justified or satisfying is it? Drop a number and a short reason. Let's get into it. I stood in the hallway outside the arbitration hearing, watching my family hover around like they were waiting for their favorite sports team to win. Mom, Dad, Aunt Karen, Uncle Dave, everyone was there. Seth, the golden child, was busy preening like he was about to walk onto a red carpet. Mom turned to me with that patronizing smile she always wore when she was trying to make me feel like a kid. "You're probably bored, sweetie," she said, nodding to the smoothie stand down the hall. "Go get Seth a smoothie, okay?" I didn't respond right away. Instead, I studied her face for a second. Same tone, same eyes, same be good, do your part vibe she'd been giving me for years. "Sure," I said, keeping my voice neutral. Seth snickered from the corner, his arms crossed, looking smug as ever. "Probably thinks this place is like a courtroom episode of CSI, he muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. The others laughed, the sound filling the hallway like a sitcom audience. I didn't even flinch. It wasn't worth it. As I turned to leave, Maria Harding, the lead corporate attorney, walked by. Her gaze flicked to mine for half a second. In that flash, I saw something. Recognition, maybe. Maybe she could tell I wasn't just some random family member caught in the crossfire. But it didn't matter. They were all too wrapped up in their own little drama to notice anything else. I kept walking toward the smoothie stand, hearing my family's laughter echoing behind me. And it hit me. They would never see me as anything but the background. The Thanksgiving dinner at Aunt Karen's lake house was a mess of oversized plates and clinking glasses. Seth was the star of the evening. His promotion to a high-level position at my uncle's logistics company practically shoved in everyone's face. He'd been talking for over 20 minutes about a new six-figure contract, leaning back in his chair like he was the damn CEO. I took a deep breath and cleared my throat, deciding to speak up. It felt like the right time. Hell, it was the only time. "I finished my federal cyber investigations credential," I said, my voice steady, maybe a little too steady. The room fell silent. For a split second, I thought maybe they hadn't heard me. But no one said anything. Not a word. Then Uncle Dave, wearing that smug look that never seemed to leave his face, let out a slow clap. The sound was fake, slow, and dripping with sarcasm. "That's cute," he said, before turning back to Seth and picking up right where he'd left off. Seth, of course, didn't miss a beat. He just grinned, his arms crossed over his chest. "Yeah, that's real cute. But have you heard about the latest deal I landed?" He launched into some new business venture, his voice loud and confident, like everything he said was gold. The room picked up again, laughter echoing around the table as they raised their glasses to Seth's latest victory. My accomplishment? Nothing more than a passing moment in the background. It wasn't even a blip on their radar. The silence I felt when I spoke felt like it had settled deep in my bones. My voice didn't matter. I didn't matter. I pushed the food around on my plate, staring down at the mashed potatoes. Maybe it was the wine, or maybe it was just that sinking feeling, but I realized then that I wasn't part of their world. Not in any real way. I looked up, briefly catching Aunt Karen's eye, but she was already laughing at something Uncle Dave said. They were all in their own world. Seth, with his easy charm, was always going to be the one they celebrated. I was just there, invisible. The rest of the evening was a blur of clinking glasses and hollow congratulations. Seth's stories kept spinning out, and the rest of them ate it up like they were listening to the next big thing. When dinner was over and the usual routine of coffee and pie settled in, I slipped away to my car. Driving back that night, I felt the cold winter air pressing against the windows. The silence inside my car, a mirror of the one I had felt at the table. The headlights cut through the blackness of the road, illuminating nothing but the empty stretch ahead. The snow was starting to fall heavier now, covering everything in a thin, quiet layer. I barely registered the miles passing by. I wasn't angry, just numb. This was my place in the family. It had always been. No matter how much I worked, no matter how hard I pushed, I would always be the quiet one in the corner, and no one would ever look past that. When I pulled into my driveway, the car's engine still idling in the cold, I sat there for a while, staring out at the dark, snow-covered street. I didn't even bother to take my coat off. It was all too much. All the years of trying to prove myself, only to be dismissed without a second thought. I finally turned off the engine and got out, the cold air biting at my skin. It matched everything I was feeling. Cold, empty, discarded. And it hit me again. The same realization that came every Thanksgiving, every Christmas. No matter what I did, I would never be more than the background noise of their lives. The fluorescent lights in the command center buzzed overhead, cutting through the low hum of computers and the constant chatter of agents working the case. My team and I were assembled around a large screen, the latest intel streaming through the briefing software. It wasn't the most glamorous place, but it was mine. I stood in front of the whiteboard, markers in hand, laying out the strategy for the sting. There was no room for mistakes. A fraudulent server farm hidden inside a distribution hub. It was big and it was messy, but we'd tracked the IPs and traced the connections. We knew exactly where they were operating. Here's the layout, I said, pointing to the diagram I'd drawn of the facility. Our primary target is the server room here, but we'll need to secure the main entrance too. No one's allowed to slip out the back. We're taking everyone. The room was quiet. Everyone knew the stakes. The team hung on every word. This wasn't a game, it was real. And they trusted me to lead them through it. I didn't need to prove anything to them. They knew my work. They knew I was good at what I did. Special Agent Kowalski stood off to the side, his arms crossed and that same skeptical expression on his face. I didn't mind it. Kowalski had been around long enough to know the difference between confidence and arrogance. He didn't tolerate mistakes, and neither did I. I outlined the timing. The raid would hit at 4 a.m. sharp. The undercover operatives were already in place, waiting for the signal. The logistics were tight. There was no margin for error. As I wrapped up, I looked around the room. All eyes were on me. Not like my family's eyes back home, full of distraction and dismissal. These people understood. They respected me, and in this world, that was everything. Kowalski spoke up, his gravelly voice cutting through the air like it always did. "Run it," he said, nodding once. No fanfare, just a simple, firm command. I met his gaze, holding it for a moment. That was it. No approval to seek, no good job to chase. Just his unspoken respect, the kind that was earned, not given. "Let's get it done," I said, already turning to lead the team into the next phase. The next day, we hit the distribution hub like a storm. The operation went down without a hitch. Precision, clean execution. The officers in place shut down the exits, cleared the floors, and moved in to seize the servers. It was a tight, tactical move. As the last of the suspects were being cuffed, one of them, an IT guy who'd been nervous from the start, flipped. He'd seen the writing on the wall. "I can tell you where the rest of the servers are," he said, sweat beading on his forehead. "But you gotta move fast. They've got a backup site. I've seen the files. They're encrypted." I leaned in, not letting my guard down. "Where?" "Warehouse on 12th. 2 guys, burner phones." He swallowed hard. "I don't know the exact location, but they're linked to a bigger operation. Bigger than you think." I nodded, feeling that familiar rush of adrenaline. This was it. This was the kind of thing that made it worth it, the kind of work that meant something. The team moved in. The intel we'd just received had opened up a new layer to the operation, something that could tie everything together. We were one step ahead now, but we had to stay focused. There was still a lot of work ahead. As I watched the officers move toward the new lead, I felt it settle in. This was where I mattered. The people here saw me for what I was, capable, precise, and not to be underestimated. This wasn't just a job. This was my world. And I was in control. It was 2 days before the arbitration hearing wrapped up, and I was sitting at my desk, poring over the latest data from the operation. My mind was sharp, focused on the task at hand, when my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with Mom's name. I didn't even hesitate to answer. "Hey, Mom," I said, trying to sound casual. I already knew what this was going to be about. Her voice came through, soft and sweet, like she was 1,000 miles away from the reality of the situation. "Hi, sweetie. I just wanted to check in. How's everything going with the case?" I gave a quick, clipped answer. "It's fine. We're making progress." There was a long pause, and I could feel her soft sigh through the phone. She always had that way of sighing like she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. "Well, Seth's just under so much pressure right now," she said, her voice rising with concern, though I could tell it was more for show than genuine worry. "You know, with everything going on in the hearing and the media, I think it's really getting to him." I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from responding too quickly. "Yeah, I'm sure it's tough," I said, my words as neutral as I could make them. She didn't take the bait. "You know, sweetie, she continued. You've always been so sensitive about Seth's teasing. He doesn't mean it. He's just trying to lighten the mood. You've got to stop taking everything so personally. I let her words hang in the air for a second, the space between us growing thick. This was the script she always ran through when she thought I was taking things too seriously. She never saw it, never got it. She didn't see the difference between teasing and being cruel. I swallowed, keeping my voice steady. I know, Mom. No, honey, I don't think you do, she said, her voice turning syrupy sweet again. I've been talking to Seth. He's really struggling with all of this. You've always been so smart, so strong. But Seth, he's just not like you. He needs you to be the bigger person here. For the family, I felt a lump forming in my throat. It wasn't anger, it was just exhaustion. Okay, Mom, I said finally. The words felt like they came from someone else. I'll think about it. You're a good girl, Riley, she said. The words a little too rehearsed, a little too easy. We just want peace. Don't make things harder than they need to be. I didn't respond to that. She'd already said it all. It wasn't about peace. It was about keeping things the way they were, the way she could ignore what was right in front of her. After a long pause, I heard her breathe out, probably convinced she'd fixed everything with one call. Okay, sweetie, love you. Love you too, I said, not feeling the words at all. I hung up, the weight of it all settling in. I sat there in silence for a few moments, staring at my phone. The call didn't surprise me, it never did. I knew what she wanted from me, and I knew what it cost me each time. To her, peace meant silence. It meant letting Seth have his way, letting him get away with whatever he wanted, and asking me to play the role of the dutiful daughter, the one who never made waves, the one who didn't matter. I glanced over at the secure folder we had just opened from the suspect who'd flipped. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. The metadata was damning, far more than I had expected. The fraudulent shell company connected directly to Seth's business dealings. And that wasn't all. There were deeper ties, connections to vendors, kickbacks, even encrypted transaction histories tied to his burner phone. My heart pounded in my chest as I scrolled. This wasn't just a small operation. Seth had been neck deep in it. It was all laid out in front of me, irrefutable. I sat back in my chair, letting the weight of the discovery sink in. It wasn't just about the hearing anymore. It was about what I had to do next. Without wasting any more time, I submitted a request for a full briefing with Harding. It had to be done now. Full disclosure, everything. There was no going back from this. I clicked send, then closed the file. Whatever was coming next, I was ready. The family, the smile, the smooth talk. It didn't matter anymore. This was bigger than all of that. And Seth would never see it coming. I walked into Maria Harding's office, not as the niece of the man at the center of this case, not as the forgotten cousin, but as someone who had a job to do. I wasn't here for sympathy, and I wasn't here to be the quiet one. I was here to present evidence, cold and unyielding. Harding was behind her desk, her posture stiff, the skepticism obvious in the tightness of her jaw. She was used to having the upper hand. People like her always were, but she wasn't in control now. Agent Ashcroft, she said, nodding toward the chair across from her, but not offering anything that could be construed as an invitation. I didn't need one. I sat, opening the secure folder I'd brought with me, the weight of it thick in the air. I assume you've seen the data we pulled from the suspect who flipped? I started, sliding my tablet toward her. She didn't respond right away, her eyes scanning the screen, but I knew she was paying attention. I have, she said after a moment, her fingers tapping on the edge of the table. But it's still circumstantial. We need more. Her voice was sharp, but I could hear the edge of uncertainty underneath. She was starting to doubt. I leaned in, knowing this was the moment to move. This isn't circumstantial. I've traced Seth's connections to the illegal vendor kickbacks through the back-end logs, encrypted accounts, password maps, everything you'd need to tie him directly to the fraud, even the invoices. Her eyes flicked back to the screen, more focused now. Show me. I swiped through the data, pulling up the encrypted transaction screenshots. She watched, silent as the pieces fell into place. Her brow furrowed when I revealed the dark web account tied to Seth's burner laptop, exactly the kind of lead that could bury him. It was like I had him by the throat, digitally speaking, and I wasn't about to let go. I'm not done, I said, pulling up another set of files. There's more. Seth isn't keeping backups at the office. He's got them stashed at his lake cabin, hidden inside a fake HVAC vent. You'll find a drive there that has everything. Full transaction logs, metadata, encrypted files, all of it. Harding didn't move for a long beat, her fingers still on the edge of the table. The silence stretched thin. Finally, she looked up, her face unreadable. If you're right, we can get a private warrant under arbitration privilege. I didn't flinch. I'm right. She nodded slowly, weighing the information. I could tell she was running the calculations in her head, mapping out the next steps, trying to decide if I was worth the risk. Without a word, I slid the last piece across the table, a decryption string I had cracked myself, a key only I had, the final piece of the puzzle. Harding's fingers hovered over the string before she took it. "You're sure this will work?" she asked, her voice low but steady. "I'm sure," I said, my eyes locking on hers. He never thought anyone would get this far. Harding's gaze didn't leave me as she inputted the key into her system, her fingers flying over the keyboard with practiced speed. As the decryption process began, I saw a shift in her expression. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but I could feel it. She wasn't just listening anymore. She was on my side. She hit a final key, and the screen lit up with files, proof of everything. Seth's entire fraud operation laid bare, the illegal transactions, the accounts, the numbers, all of it. Harding leaned back in her chair, her fingers tapping the desk in quiet contemplation. Then she looked up at me, a small, knowing smile tugging at her lips. "He never thought you would." I didn't return the smile. There was nothing to smile about. This wasn't over. But in that moment, for the first time, I felt like I was sitting at a table that finally saw me for what I really was, someone who had the power to change everything. The rest was just waiting for the right moment to strike. 3 days later, the ping came through, and I couldn't stop the small knot that tightened in my stomach when I saw the subject line. Evidence recovered. I clicked the notification, my eyes scanning the attached files. Everything was there, the full archive, transaction data, encrypted files, whistleblower threats that Seth had sent in a series of desperate emails. And there it was, a PDF Seth had made himself, detailing his manipulation of suppliers, boasting about the millions he'd pocketed by underhandedly securing kickbacks. I let the weight of it sink in. This wasn't just about a few shady transactions. This was the kind of thing that could break a man like Seth, could break him and everything he thought he was. I had every reason to be satisfied, but there was no time for relief. Not yet. I checked my phone. Harding hadn't replied with any sort of thanks or acknowledgement, but her message was blunt. "You'll be called to confirm chain." I stared at the words, knowing that the next stage was already in motion. The quiet confidence that I had built over the past few days was about to be tested. There was no backing down now. The following morning, I arrived at the arbitration hearing. The room was a sea of glossy suits and polished faces, all bustling with quiet confidence. I slipped into the back and sat among my family, who were as chattery and eager as ever. The energy in the air was thick, like the calm before a storm. Seth was already there, sitting up front with his defense team. He looked relaxed, almost smug, like he was untouchable, the same way he always did. His little show for the family. It was always about his charm, always about making them forget the things they didn't want to see. My mom, as usual, was talking to Aunt Karen, laughing, her face flushed with excitement. Seth had done something impressive. I was sure of it. My uncle was nodding in that way he did when he agreed with anything Seth said. Nothing had changed. The defense had just wrapped up, and I could see the smugness radiating from Seth's posture. He leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed over his chest. I felt my stomach churn, but I didn't show it. Then Harding stood. She didn't say anything at first. She just walked up to the podium, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. She was calm, controlled. She didn't look like someone who was about to drop a bombshell, but I knew what was coming. She scanned the room once, her gaze briefly passing over Seth, his family, the defense team, before she addressed the panel of arbitrators. "We request testimony from Ms. Riley Ashcroft, Cybersecurity Compliance Specialist for the National Cybercrime Task Force," Harding said, her voice steady and clear. I froze. It hit me like a punch to the gut. My name, spoken aloud in this cold, clinical setting. It wasn't just a request, it was an announcement. The eyes in the room swung to me, some curious, others puzzled. Seth's face fell, just a little, like the pieces were starting to click. He leaned forward slightly, narrowing his eyes at me as if he hadn't realized I was involved in the case until this very moment. Why are they calling her? I heard him mutter under his breath, his voice loud enough for me to catch. I didn't look at him, didn't acknowledge his words. I just stood, taking a slow breath as I removed my blazer, revealing the NCTF credentials clipped to my belt. I didn't rush. I didn't have to. Every eye in the room was on me now, the sound of my footsteps echoing as I made my way to the front. The room was silent. My family, looking completely confused, started whispering to each other. Someone in the back row actually muttered, "She's with them?" The disbelief in their voices was a thin veil over the discomfort that was quickly bubbling to the surface. I didn't look at anyone in the gallery, not once, not even my mother, who I could feel staring at me from behind. I walked toward the front with the same purpose that had carried me through every case I'd worked. I was no longer the daughter, the quiet one, the invisible cousin. I was here to do my job, to show everyone what I had always been capable of. The arbitrators nodded as I approached. One of them even said, "Thank you for being here, Agent Ashcroft." And just like that, for the first time in my life, my name meant something. The room went dead silent. It wasn't a subtle shift. It was immediate. Every conversation halted. Every chair creaked under a body suddenly stiff with tension. I could feel every set of eyes on me. My mother blinked, looking at me like she had misheard. Her hand froze mid-motion as she reached for her purse, the sudden shift in the atmosphere clearly catching her off guard. My aunt leaned in, whispering something to her, though I couldn't hear the words. I could guess, probably some sort of quiet concern about why I was standing up. My uncle too shifted in his seat, like he was suddenly uncomfortable with what was unfolding. But none of that mattered. None of it. Seth's eyes flicked to me, narrowing as if trying to process the scene. His lips parted, and I caught him muttering under his breath, "Why are they calling her?" I didn't look at him. I didn't look at anyone in the gallery. I didn't need to. I slowly rose from my seat, the soft scrape of the chair against the floor cutting through the room. I reached up, took off my blazer, and deliberately unclipped the NCTF credentials from my belt, letting them hang in full view. The silence deepened, and a ripple of gasps moved through the row behind me. Someone even whispered, "She's with them?" I didn't flinch. I didn't hesitate. I kept my eyes forward, walking toward the front with slow, deliberate steps. The click of my heels on the floor was sharp, purposeful, and drowned out all the murmurings and whispers behind me. I didn't care about them. I had walked into this room as an investigator, not as the niece they barely acknowledged, not as the family member they all dismissed. I was here to do my job. I could hear my heartbeat steady in my chest, each beat like a reminder of where I was and why I was there. The panel of arbitrators watched me approach, their faces neutral, but their postures slightly more rigid, more alert. I could see one of them nodding as I reached the front, the others leaning in just a little, as if preparing themselves for what came next. I didn't look back at my family, at Seth, at anyone. I was focused. There was no room for anything else. When I reached the podium, I stood tall, straight-backed, just as I had been taught. The first time in my life, I felt the weight of my name in a way that wasn't tied to family expectations or judgment. I wasn't someone's afterthought anymore. One of the arbitrators spoke, his voice cutting through the stillness. "Thank you for being here, Agent Ashcroft." And there it was. The simple acknowledgement, the recognition that had eluded me for years. I nodded, offering a polite but firm thank you in return. But my mind didn't linger on the words. For the first time, I didn't have to fight for my place. My name was said in a room full of people who didn't care about family drama or who had been the loudest at Thanksgiving dinner. It meant something. And it wasn't just for me. It was for everything I had built, everything that had led me here. Seth's smugness was gone. I could feel his eyes on me now, not with confidence, but with confusion, maybe even fear. But I didn't care. I didn't need his validation anymore. I was beyond that. For the first time, my name meant something. I stood at the podium, the cool, sterile weight of the room pressing down on me. No one spoke. The arbitrators, the defense team, my family, all of them waited for me to begin. The sharp click of my heels still echoed in my head. I didn't need to make a show of it. This was my time to let the evidence speak. I cleared my throat, then dove into the details. The data presented was obtained through standard cyber investigative procedures. I started, my voice neutral, clinical. No room for sentiment, no room for drama. Just facts. I clicked the remote to bring up the first slide. The first file path is located in an encrypted container found on a burner laptop associated with Seth Ashcroft. The device ID matches the one previously identified in the metadata, pulled from vendor kickback transactions. I didn't pause. I didn't need to. The numbers, the facts, they were there, undeniable. Another click, and the next slide came up. These are the decrypted files. As you can see, they contain multiple supplier transaction logs, including invoices for kickbacks, all encrypted and stored under a private dark web account tied to the same burner laptop. I didn't even glance at Seth as I continued. His fidgeting, the small beads of sweat beginning to form on his forehead, none of it distracted me. I wasn't here for theatrics. I was here for results. On this next slide, we have the location of the backup drive, I said, moving to the next file. It's stored at a lake house owned by Seth Ashcroft, hidden inside a fake HVAC vent. I confirmed this through both metadata traces and a physical sweep conducted after authorization. I let that one hang in the air. I didn't need to say more. The visual of a hidden drive in a fake vent did all the work for me. I could hear the faint shuffle of papers behind me, the noise of people absorbing the weight of it all. I looked up briefly. My uncle's face had drained of color. Seth was no longer relaxed. His eyes darted around, shifting in his seat. My mother had both hands over her mouth now, her fingers trembling slightly. I could almost hear the collective realization ripple through the gallery. The smug assumptions that had been wrapped around Seth for so long were being torn apart, one fact at a time. Harding stood a few steps behind me, a silent partner in this moment. She didn't need to speak. The evidence was enough. My calm, informed voice was louder than any drama she could have added. The arbitrators didn't seem fazed. One of them, a woman with glasses perched on the edge of her nose, leaned forward, scribbling notes. When I finished detailing the last bit of evidence, she asked, "Can you confirm how these files were stored, Ms. Ashcroft?" "Of course," I replied without hesitation. The files were stored in multiple locations across encrypted drives, each linked to the burner laptop identified earlier. The metadata corroborates the timestamps and logins, indicating unauthorized access and download patterns consistent with fraudulent activity. Another arbitrator, a man with graying hair, looked at me with a slight frown. "And this data, how certain are you that it hasn't been tampered with?" 0% chance, I answered. The encryption protocols are standard. We utilize the NCTF's approved decryption methods and checked for any sign of alteration. There's no discrepancy in the files. It's all intact. I didn't allow myself to feel relief. Not yet. I wasn't here for personal victories. This was still just one step of the process. But in the back of my mind, I felt the old weight, the one that used to press down on me in family rooms, during dinners where my accomplishments were overlooked. That weight had lifted. When I finished, I stepped back from the podium, the room still heavy with the silence that followed my testimony. I didn't look back at my family, not once. They could process it on their own. Instead, I made my way toward Harding, who was already sitting at the table, her expression unreadable but calm. I didn't sit back down in my family's row, didn't even spare a glance at them. I wasn't one of them anymore. I sat beside Harding, the chair creaking slightly as I settled in. There was a quiet kind of respect in her eyes. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. I had done what I came to do. The evidence had fallen, and now it was time to wait for the fallout. Months passed. The case wrapped up neatly, just as we'd predicted. Seth was gone, his empire of fraud crumbling with him. The fallout was immediate and swift. He was convicted on all charges and sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. It didn't change anything for me. Nothing personal, nothing sentimental. The family had already shown me where I stood. Meanwhile, I kept moving forward. My name was on the door now. Riley Ashcroft, Senior Cybersecurity Investigator, etched in clean letters on a secure lab. The team treated me like I was one of them. There was trust there, real trust. Not the kind I'd been desperate to earn for years, but the kind that came with competence and precision. I didn't have to explain myself anymore. It felt different, but it felt right. We'd just wrapped up another major case, a good one, the kind that kept the wheels of the department turning, that made us look good to the higher-ups. After hours, we went out for drinks. It wasn't anything grand, just a low-key bar near the office, but it felt like home. Not blood, not family, but respect. People who got it. People who understood what it meant to work, to sacrifice, to be sharp in the face of everything that tried to make you dull. I leaned back against the sticky bar counter, listening to the easy chatter of my team, the laughter, the clinking of glasses. It was simple, but it was mine. They didn't know about the Thanksgiving dinners, the years of being invisible. They didn't need to. In this space, I was enough. Later that night, after I'd made my way back to my office, my phone buzzed with a text. I almost didn't want to look at it, but I did. It was from my mom. Seth got 10 years. I don't know what to say. I'm sorry. We didn't understand. I stared at the screen for a few seconds. Then I read it again. I felt nothing. Just an odd, quiet peace. Not anger, not relief. Just nothing. It wasn't that I didn't care. I cared enough to understand what this was. But it was too late for any of it. I'd seen the whole thing coming. And, most importantly, I had seen myself the whole time. I didn't reply. There was nothing to say. I archived the message and turned my phone face down on my desk. The screen stared back at me, silent. I didn't need to answer. They never saw me coming. But I saw myself, and that was all that mattered.